Hello and welcome to another update regarding current economic affairs on our YouTube channel Earnest Economics. In the second decade of the 21st century, many financial scandals of international level got exposed. Big leaks of financial information exposing money laundering in the past decade include in 2013 we have offshore leaks, then we have Swiss leaks in 2015, Panama Papers in 2016 and Paradise Papers in 2017. Now recently in the past month, September 2020, another global financial fraud extending almost for 20 years has been exposed. It is called FinCEN files, and it is the latest entry into the list of the global financial frauds that we are witnessing. In this lecture, we are going to elaborate upon the issue of FinCEN files. And obviously, the first thing that we need to understand is what exactly is this issue of FinCEN files. Now, to explain what the issue of FinCEN is all about, we need to be conversant about three terms: money laundering, FinCEN and SARS. The last two are acronyms which we will be elaborating, but let's begin with money laundering. So what is this money laundering? Now, money laundering is actually concealment of the origins of illegally obtained money, typically by means of transfers involving foreign banks or legitimate businesses. Businessmen, politicians, and even outright criminals and their companies, that the companies they have, what they do is that they utilize banking channels around the world to move their wealth across borders or tax havens to avoid taxes, to avoid taxation, or to avoid detection. So this is what money laundering is all about. So they are using banks so that nobody comes to know about the dirty money that they are having, and they are utilizing it. They are using different channels, particularly the banking channels or the business channels, so that the origins are kept secret from government agencies. So this is money laundering. Now, what is FinCEN? It is an acronym, as I said, which means Financial Crime Enforcement Network. Now, actually, this is a United States of America's institution which has been given the responsibility of looking into the issue of money laundering that may be taking place, particularly in dollars. So it's a leading global regulator against money laundering. Now, concerns about transactions made in the US dollars need to be sent to FinCEN. So if, for example, in a particular bank they feel that a particular transaction could be potentially a case of money laundering, then these banks need to report to FinCEN, Financial Crime Enforcement Network. Even if these transactions may be taking place outside United States of America, but so long as they are taking place in US dollars, they need to be reported to the US agency FinCEN. So we are now conversant with money laundering and FinCEN. Now our third term is SARS. S-A-R and small s. What exactly does it mean? It means suspicious activity reports. Suspicious activity report is SAR, and it is actually a document that is filled by banks and financial institutions to report suspicious activities to the FinCEN. Now we are connecting the links, we are connecting the dots. So different banks are actually submitting suspicious activity reports to the FinCEN in case they feel that a particular transaction could be a case of money laundering. Now, transactions where there seems to be no place and money is flowing to or from high risk jurisdictions like tax havens. So these are also reported by banks through SARS to FinCEN. And also if transactions involve suspicious or already exposed persons or parties, they too are reported through SARS to FinCEN, Financial Crime Enforcement Network. Now, we need to know here that these SARs actually they are secret files. They are not even told. They are not the people about whom these are reported. They are not informed about that. So these are supposed to be confidential and secret. And also, the SR, a suspicious activity report, by itself is not an accusation. It actually is simply an indication that this very transaction could be a case of money laundering. It may be involving dirty money from one destination to another. So now we are conversant with these three terms, money laundering, FinCEN and SARS. Now we are in a position to define and understand what actually FinCEN files are. FinCEN files are actually a cache of a set of SARS, suspicious activity reports, which were sent by different banks to FinCEN, Financial Crime Enforcement Network of United States of America. These files, obviously, they are secret, they are confidential, they were not supposed to be known to or known by other people beyond the Financial Crime Enforcement Network, but somehow these files got exposed, and we'll be talking about how they got exposed. And these files actually cover a time period from 1999 to 2017. Now let's try to understand how FinCEN files got exposed, which were supposed to remain secret and confidential within the four walls of the FinCEN organization. So what happens is that FinCEN or SARS files were investigated upon by congressional committees in the United States of America. So why did they need to study is because their purpose was to investigate the role of Russian interference in the United States presidential election of 2016. It was thought that Russia was influencing the US presidential elections, therefore they might have involved different banking channels to send funds in the United States of America. So what was happening was that these documents which were with the FinCEN were handed over to the congressional committees of United States of America who were studying Russian interference in the American presidential elections. And from this exposure, the primary exposure, obviously the files were given to congressional committees. From there, what happens is that a global news organization by the name of BuzzFeed News obtained the FinCEN files, and it was FinCEN files who shared these documents with ICIJ. What is ICIJ? It is International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. So they handed over these documents to International Consortium of Investigative Journalists because they are sort of experts in dealing with these issues, investigating these cases. Therefore, they were given access to this by BuzzFeed News. And the ICIJ is actually a US-based international network of more than 250 investigative journalists. It involves some 100 media organizations, and it is spread over almost over 100 countries and territories of the world. So it is a very big phenomenon by itself. And now recently on September, I believe 20, the BuzzFeed News published its reports on FinCEN files. So once they published these reports, now the world came to know about the issue of FinCEN files. Now, what are the basic statistics? How much money laundering has been taking place, or potential money laundering that has been there? Though different news organizations, particularly whether you talk about BuzzFeed, ICIJ, and then many other big international news organizations, they believe that it is almost certain that this is the case of money laundering, and there is a sort of a tested tacit agreement with their conclusion by different banks when they were approached by different organizations, and they said that there might have been lapses on our part and we are trying to correct all these things. Now, according to the SARS, according to FinCEN filers, the potential money laundering case that emerges from these filers, it is of the value of 2.09 trillion US dollars. So it's a very big amount. It's a very huge amount. Now, if you break that into a per year average of transfers that have taken place on the basis of $2.09 trillion, if you divide that into, for example, 19 years or 2 decades, so it amounts to more than 100 billion each year. It is more than 280 million dollars each day transaction taking place through different banking channels, which are cases of money laundering that is taking place around the world. And the big banks that are involved in this is we have the number one position goes to Deutsche Bank, that belongs to Germany. Then we have JP Morgan Chase. These are the banks who have actually submitted SARS, who have actually said that there are transactions that are taking place through us which we believe could be potential cases of money laundering. So this is something that is the data emerges from the bank itself. So then Deutsche Bank, it involves some 1,300 plus billion dollars of transactions which they reported as suspicious activity reports. Then we have JP Morgan Chase, we have Standard Chartered, we have Banks of New York Mellon, then we have Barclays, we have HSBC Holdings, etc. All these banks report through SARS that transactions, it's in billions that transactions have taken place through them, which are the cases of money laundering. Is this FinCEN file scandal only that big? Is it only 2.09 trillion or is it much larger? Now, what the experts say is that the congressional committees which were actually investigating SARS, suspicious activity reports, they were actually concerned with a specific set of SARS. They were not concerned with all the SARS that were submitted by various banks to FinCEN. So what they say is that this is just at the tip of the iceberg. The phenomenon is much larger than what has been what it seems to be from FinCEN files. So it is just the tip of the iceberg. It's a very small amount of what actually is happening behind the curtains through banks, and which even comes in the notice of the Financial Crime Enforcement Network. Who is responsible in this entire phenomenon? Now, we know obviously those people, businessmen, politicians, and then criminals who transfer their money, obtain it through illegal means to hide its origins or to avoid taxation. They are the culprits. They are sort of primary culprits in this entire phenomenon. But we have two important agencies which sort of play even more dangerous and criminal role in this entire phenomenon. The first are the banks itself, because when banks are sending suspicious activity report to Financial Crime Enforcement Network of United States of America, they indirectly believe, or they indirectly assert that the transaction that is taking place through us, it is a potential case of money laundering, and that is the only reason that they are sending this suspicious activity report. So banks who allowed these transactions, despite knowing money laundering nature of these transactions, are one primary agency which which is a culprit in this entire phenomenon. The second culprit, and a very major culprit, is the FinCEN itself, because all these banks were sending reports to FinCEN, Financial Crime Enforcement Network, but Financial Crime Enforcement Network sort of put them into the dustbin, and they didn't take action on the basis of the SARS, suspicious activity reports, that were submitted to them by different banks. So both these institutions have been sort of tacitly approving what was going under their watch. Both banks and FinCEN have been sort of complicit in this entire criminal movement of money from one place to another place. So this is what FinCEN files is all about. The latest financial fraud that we have witnessed, that got exposed in the last month through BuzzFeed News, and which has been investigated upon by International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. I hope this discussion on FinCEN files would be helpful for all of us to understand what exactly is happening behind the curtains through banks and under the watch of financial crime network organizations who are supposed to prevent money laundering at the international level. Thank you very much.